Why does only Julia have to go through this? If it was going to be like this, it would have been better if she hadn't been born at all. Next to me, standing dumbfounded, my mother cried out and collapsed to the floor. Julia, my beloved daughter. Just as my mother says, what was Julia born for? Such a short life, filled with nothing but suffering. Is there no God in this world? Or is this a trial given to me by God? I want to cry, I want to scream, but my emotions are frozen solid. Right after starting elementary school, Julia was involved in an accident that robbed her of all the joys of living. She can't laugh, talk, walk, or run anymore. She's been in a vegetative state for 7 years. Just lying in the hospital bed, her eyes and mouth vacantly open. Yet, I believed. I believed that one day, Julia would wake up and say mommy. However, a further tragedy struck Julia at the age of 14. Incredibly, she was pregnant. Unable to move, to communicate, still just a 14-year-old child, Julia was. Who did this? Who could do such a terrible thing? Next to me, seething with rage as we listened to the doctor's explanation, my husband, shaking with anger, spoke up. We don't need a DNA test. I don't even want to know who the perpetrator is. Quietly, yet clearly, my husband declared this and stood up. Why did my husband say such a thing? Pulling my hand in shock, he led me out of the medical office, returning silently to Julia's hospital room. And there, he uttered something unbelievable. With a faint smile. I'm Tina, 38 years old. A family of 3 with my husband and daughter. I've been with Ken, a year older than me, since college, and we got married about a year after graduating. I quit my first job after just 6 months. The job was demanding, and the interpersonal relationships within the company took a toll on my mental health. My first job failure cast a long shadow over my future. I was terrified of going for another job interview. Maybe I'm just not suited for society. No way. You were able to keep up with a part-time job for 4 years, right? It's just that this company wasn't the right fit for you. Even when I became reclusive at home, Ken continued to invite me out on dates. Our dates back then involved drives and visiting places surrounded by nature, and I was happy to feel Ken's considerate feelings for me. One day, while driving to the beach. If you're so scared of getting a job, why not marry me? Walking along the shore, I looked at Ken, and the next moment, we both burst into laughter. Stop it, don't joke about that all of a sudden. My face turned bright red with embarrassment and joy, and all I could do was laugh it off. Would you be mad if I said I was serious? I've thought since college that if I were to marry, it would only be Tina. If being a shut-in is wasting your time, maybe changing the environment by getting married isn't a bad idea. Moved by Ken's kindness, I found myself tearing up. Take your time and think about it. Sooner or later, I was planning to propose to Tina anyway. Even as I began to calm down mentally, I was too scared to leave the house at that time. Despite wanting to do something about it, I hated how I couldn't move. It felt like Ken showed me a ray of light. Soon after, we got married and started living together. Ken found a room for us near my parents' house. I will protect Tina for the rest of my life. My parents were a bit conflicted about our decision to marry, but in the end, they accepted and supported us. I think Ken's seriousness and sincerity reached them too. We faced no opposition to our marriage from Ken's parents. My in-laws live in the countryside, a 3-hour drive away, and it seems Ken has no intention of moving back there. Don't worry about us, just come and visit once in a while. My sister-in-law had married a few years earlier, and now it's just the two of them enjoying their life together. For me, carrying anxiety in my heart, this sense of distance from my in-laws was truly a blessing. Married life changed my surroundings drastically, just as Ken had said. Becoming a stay-at-home mom and taking on all the household chores, Ken thanked me every day. Thanks so much. Tina's such a great cook, I just can't help but overeat. Really? There's more, so eat up. Being married to Tina, I really am the luckiest guy. I'm actually useful to my husband. These small, real moments gradually helped me regain my confidence. Then, something I hadn't anticipated happened. About 6 months into our marriage, I found out I was pregnant. The pregnancy was nothing but a source of fear for me. With lingering anxiety about being able to function as an adult, could I really raise a child? I decided to share my feelings honestly with Ken. I'm really happy this child is coming to our home. Ken's words gave me an epiphany. So, this child chose me? I hadn't thought of it that way. You know, I was a child of a 39-year-old mother. I always envied kids with younger parents. Now, I'm really happy I can be that young parent. It seemed my in-laws married late, as they were both in their 60s when we went to announce our marriage. Seeing Ken happy about being a young dad made me gradually share in his joy. Yeah, you're right. This child chose me. It's something to be happy about. Filled with anxiety and focused only on myself, I suddenly felt embarrassed by my previous attitude. Ken was incredibly supportive throughout the pregnancy, and I felt truly lucky to be married to him. We had a girl. Our daughter's first cry was the sound of our angel arriving. I'll never forget the emotion of holding her for the first time. The weight of our daughter in my arms, though small, was enough to make me feel the weight of life. Thank you for being born to me. No matter what happens, I'll protect you. I found myself naturally speaking to our newborn daughter. I believe it was my declaration as a mother. Our daughter Julia grew up healthy and lively. Raising her with Ken, though challenging and filled with laughter every day, was a struggle. Going for checkups, making our park debut, taking her to visit her grandparents, raising Julia made me feel stronger. When Julia turned 3, I started working lunchtimes at a nearby cafe. 5 years since my employment setback. It was a release from a long period of suffering. The dreaded call came shortly after Julia started elementary school and a major holiday had ended. Hello, please stay calm. Your daughter has been involved in a serious accident. I don't remember how I responded, but after hanging up, I immediately contacted Ken and we rushed to the hospital where Julia was taken. The throbbing pulse in my ears only grew my anxiety. God, please save Julia. Arriving at the hospital, we found that emergency surgery was underway. Ken, who arrived later, found me sitting, head in hands, and hugged me. It's gonna be okay, Julia will definitely be okay. It sounded like he was reassuring me, but also convincing himself. After a long, long wait, we sat silently in the waiting room until Julia's surgery was finished. When the in-surgery sign turned off and the doctor came out, Julia had survived, but she was unconscious and in a critical condition. She's alive. Just knowing that, I thanked God at that moment. While supporting a sobbing me, Ken also repeated, "Thank goodness, really, thank goodness." At that time, we truly felt that way. According to the police, the accident was caused by a man in his 20s working at a restaurant, who had been drinking until early morning. His drunk driving led his car to crash at high speed into a group of elementary students walking to school. The man had taken a residential street as a shortcut, not sober yet, eager to get home, unaware it was a school route at that time. Fortunately, the other children only suffered minor injuries, but that fact weighed heavily on my heart. Why only Julia? Why this fate? Faced with this harsh reality, I couldn't help but utter those words. Days passed since the surgery, and Julia's consciousness did not return. Her vaguely open eyes stared at the ceiling today, too. Julia was in a vegetative state. Yet, we were grateful that Julia was alive. Even when I found myself crying, having Julia right in front of me was what I loved the most. Good morning, Julia. It's pretty hot outside today. Listen, Mommy messed up at work. I talked to Julia over and over again every day, believing that somehow my voice reached her. Julia, I'm home. I bought a new book thinking we could read it together. Ken always made sure to stop by the hospital after work, cherishing his time with Julia. We both felt our connection with Julia, even as she stared up at the ceiling. "Look, Julia finds this book interesting too." "Really? Then Mommy will read it to you tomorrow." When the three of us were together, it seemed like Julia's expression was the most relaxed. We truly believed it wasn't just our imagination. Months later, the perpetrator was found guilty and a significant amount of compensation was paid. The figure was unimaginable, but it wasn't equal to Julia's life. If this money could bring Julia back, we would have given it all up in an instant. A year had passed since the accident. Julia's classmates had moved on to the second grade. It was around this time that Ken's behavior started to change. "Hello, sorry, I'm gonna be late because of work today, so I won't make it to the hospital." Even though he used to visit daily, it then became every other day, then every 2 days, and gradually, Ken's visits to the hospital became less frequent. "Hey, even just 10 minutes would be good, show Julia your face. She seems lonely in the evening since you haven't been coming." "Yeah, I get it. Work's been busy, sorry." Despite my repeated requests, now he only shows up about 3 days a month. And when he wasn't visiting the hospital, he started coming home drunk every night. I was exhausted from juggling household chores, my part-time job, and hospital visits, getting irritated with Ken for going out to drink, and my stress kept building up. One day, Ken came home drunk and accidentally broke a glass of water on the floor. The moment that sound echoed, something inside me snapped. "If this is how it's gonna be, I'd rather we just get a divorce." Ken looked startled. "I don't want to be worn down by anything other than Julia's situation. If you're not going to cooperate, then leave now." As I said it, tears streamed down my face. "I'm sorry. It's not that. Thinking about Julia just hurts too much." Ken, suddenly sober, continued earnestly. "Just the thought of this being our life forever makes me feel like my chest is gonna burst. I'm sorry. I've been numbing it with alcohol." "Why? Then how am I supposed to numb this pain? If I run away, who's gonna take care of Julia?" We were both utterly exhausted. "I'm really sorry." That night, we cried in each other's arms. The year we spent hoping and waiting for Julia to wake up carried its own weight and a sense of finality. It's those moments when the goal seems unreachable that feel unbearable. I can't even think about being away from Julia and Tina. I'm sorry. I'll do better, both as a father and a husband. I knew Ken was struggling, but hearing him put it into words somewhat eased my anger, and I decided to trust his words one more time. Unaware of the terrible betrayal that was to come from him. For years after the accident, Julia turned 11. That year, we received a rare call from Ken's parents. "It seems like my sister got divorced and came back home." According to Ken's mom, his sister had been caught misusing family funds and was divorced. She was being asked to pay back the misused funds and child support. "My sister's job hunting, so they asked if we could send some money for a while. Is that okay?" "If it's just until she finds a job, I guess it's unavoidable." "But why did your sister misuse the family's money?" Having lived far from Ken's sister, I had only met her a few times, and she seemed to be a quiet and unassuming person. "Apparently, she was trying to impress her friends by treating them, and it went on for years. She didn't seem the type to do that. But we're stretched thin with Julia's situation, so we can't help much." "Yeah. I'll manage within my salary, so don't worry, Tina." "Okay." In reality, apart from my part-time income, Ken managed all our finances. When we first got married, I was unstable and a stay-at-home mom, and Ken was really reliable in that area. He took care of all the hospital procedures and payments for Julia, so I felt at ease leaving it to him. However, around this time, Ken started to decrease his hospital visits again. "Julia. Daddy got promoted to section manager. I might not be able to visit as much, but I'm gonna work hard for Julia and Mommy." One day, after work, Ken came to the hospital and told Julia while stroking her head. "Wow, that's amazing. Julia, Daddy's amazing, huh?" Julia, as always, looked up but her face seemed happy. Thanks. But I'll be coming home late and there'll be more business trips. I might make you two feel lonely, sorry. Ken explaining properly to Julia made me feel less anxious than before. We three can keep going strong. I thought so. 2 years had passed since Ken's work really picked up, and he stopped visiting the hospital. One day, a hospital clerk mentioned, "This month's hospital payment hasn't been made yet?" I thought to contact Ken, but he was on a business trip to Kentucky until the day after tomorrow. The hospital payments were cash only, so I decided to sort it out myself and check the bank accounts. I casually checked the balance in an account. I was shocked to see the compensation money had more than halved. Even though Julia's hospital fees are high, this decrease was too much. I immediately called Ken. Hey! The money for Julia has more than halved. What did you spend it on? My heart was pounding. What if this money runs out and we can't pay the hospital bills? Our salaries alone wouldn't cover it. After a while of silence, Ken finally spoke. I told you before about sending money back home, right? And since becoming a section manager, socializing costs more. It can't be helped, can it? Sending money back home? Your sister still hasn't found a job? And you promised that the remittance would come from your salary, right? So, Ken had been sending money to his family for 2 years? That money was paid for Julia. Without it, we can't make it on just our earnings. There's still plenty left. And who knows how long Julia has to live anyway. What? I was shocked by Ken's words. He had given up not just on Julia waking up, but also on her living. Realizing my silence, Ken seemed to panic. My salary going up, it'll be fine. Don't worry. Gotta go back to work, talk later. And with that, the call ended. That was the moment distrust sprouted in me. I took the bank card, paid at the hospital, and then headed to my parents' house. When Ken returned from his trip and I told him about the bank account, he became furious. He started throwing furniture in the living room and knocking things off shelves. I had never seen Ken so enraged. I need some solace too. These 7 years, thinking about Julia not recovering scared me to death. He shouted, throwing things on the floor indiscriminately. He was like a child throwing a tantrum because he didn't get his way. What's wrong with using money to distract myself? That included compensation for the family too. Is family just you? Have you ever considered my feelings? I told you before, when do I get to take a break? Stop saying things just to suit yourself. Without waiting for Ken's reply, I firmly stated. From now on, I will manage Julia's money. Okay? Ken, with clenched fists shaking, glared at me silently, then sighed heavily as if deflated. Fine then. I won't put a single dime into this house anymore. I'll use my money for my family and for going out drinking. So don't you complain. With those words, Ken stormed out of the house. From that day, he truly didn't return home. Unable to make ends meet on just my part-time salary, I consulted with my parents and decided to move back in with them. It's okay. We'll support you and Julia. You're trying too hard on your own. I never realized until now how powerful my parents' love could be for me. Are you going to sell the house? If you're thinking about divorce, I'll look for a lawyer. Thank you. But I need to think about it a bit more. I have distrust towards Ken. Still, I wanted to avoid the situation where Julia wakes up to find her familiar home gone. So, both Ken and I continued to pay the rent for the house, even though we weren't returning to it. I still believed. Believed that one day, Julia would wake up and say Mommy. Believed that Ken would return to being the kind, loving father Julia remembered. 7 years have passed since the accident. Julia had turned 14. Even without consciousness, her body kept growing. Her small body from when she was in first grade had limbs that had lengthened, and she was beginning to take on a womanly figure. Hey Julia, if things were normal, you'd be wearing a school uniform by now. Maybe you'd have your first crush? As I spoke to Julia, I found myself unable to stop the tears. Half a year has passed. Ken hadn't visited Julia even once. Where had the kind husband who adored Julia gone? I felt like I was being crushed by an endless anxiety. One day, after finishing my part-time job and heading to the hospital, I noticed something odd when I lifted the hem of Julia's pajamas to wipe her body. Julia's lower abdomen seemed slightly protruded. Given that Julia received nutrition through a tube in her stomach, lifting her pajamas usually highlighted her thinness. The bulge in her lower abdomen stood out oddly against her slender frame. Could it be an illness? Worried, I immediately called for a nurse. After explaining the situation, the nurse quickly brought in the attending physician, but the examination's result was unimaginable. I immediately called Ken. Please, come to the hospital quickly. What's happened to Julia? Julia is pregnant. There's a baby in her belly. Unable to hold back my sobs, Ken softly said, "Understood. I'll be there as soon as I can." For Julia's sake, Ken would still come rushing. Despite everything, he was still her father. Feeling somewhat calmed by this thought, we waited for Ken to arrive at the hospital to hear the doctor's explanation. Is my daughter really pregnant? Yes, there's no mistake. The doctor said, showing us the ultrasound image which clearly displayed something resembling a fetus. Considering your daughter's condition, delivery would be difficult. The doctor informed us with a grave expression. I felt as if everything went dark before my eyes. Who did this? Who could do such a terrible thing? Even as I covered my eyes with my hands, tears of anger and sadness kept flowing. My daughter can't move or communicate. She couldn't have consented to this. You know this better than anyone, right? The doctor remained silent, unable to respond. Feeling reassured by Ken's assertive manner, I was grateful he was beside me. It's unthinkable, but she must have been raped. This happened inside the hospital, didn't it? You can't say this has nothing to do with you. How does the hospital plan to take responsibility for this? Though I thought I could only cry, anger surged within me at Ken's mention of rape. Why does only Julia have to suffer through this? I can't forgive the perpetrator. Please, do DNA testing, anything, to find the person responsible. As I pleaded through tears, Ken gently seated me and said, Of course, we will report this to the police. Is that okay with you? Certainly. We will report this to our superiors and consider our next steps, the doctor said, offering a standard apology. After the conversation, I was stunned, but I could feel Ken's fists trembling with rage beside me. Make sure the hospital shows some sincerity. And, glaring at the doctor, Ken unexpectedly said, We don't need a DNA test. I don't want to know who the perpetrator is. Quietly but firmly, Ken declared this and stood up. We left the medical office in silence and returned to Julia's hospital room. Feeling reassured by Ken's presence, yet his last words left me deeply troubled. As soon as we closed the door to the hospital room, Ken said something unbelievable. We'll be getting more money now. What? See, the compensation money was running low, right? This should ease your worries. Ken had a faint smile on his lips. You're managing the bank account, right? So, I'll manage the money that comes in from the hospital this time. It's only fair. I couldn't understand what he was talking about. What are you saying? Did you not hear the explanation earlier? Julia might die. And you're talking about money now? It's okay. Julia's grown so much, she'll surely withstand the surgery. Ken hasn't seen Julia's body in years. Julia, surviving on the bare minimum nutrition, doesn't have the strength for it. And what about your words earlier? You're okay if the perpetrator isn't caught? Julia was subjected to something terrible. Then, Ken's face contorted for a moment. I don't want to know. If I see that guy's face, I might lose it. I can't take any more bad feelings. It's too much to bear. Not wanting to deal with bad feelings? Unable to bear it? Julia is the one actually experiencing it right now. She's being told to endure because you can't? Unforgivable. Just as I was about to confront him, Ken's phone rang. Hello. Oh, wait a sec. Ken whispered to me, it's from work, and left the room. I instinctively thought it was a woman. The moment he put the phone to his ear, I could see his lips relax. I could hear Ken's voice in the hallway. Yeah, it's okay. How about going to the spa next time? Looks like we'll be getting some money. Yeah, I'll come home early today. Ken was having an affair. I was sure of it. The compensation money had diminished because he was spending it on that woman, or planning to. If that was true, it was unforgivable. Sorry, gotta go back to work now. Ken said, then left the hospital room without even looking at Julia. I stepped out of the room too and immediately called my dad. On the day of the surgery, my parents came to the hospital to encourage Julia with "You can do it." Ken was there too, but only exchanged a few words with my parents. Ken, sitting with his head down, looked sad, as if praying for the surgery to go well, but I couldn't trust his appearance anymore. The day before, I had a long talk with Julia. How happy I was when she was born, how much I loved her, how her smile always saved me, and how grateful I was that she chose me as her mom. Julia, I'm so sorry for making you go through so much pain. I promised to protect you, and I really am sorry. I will never forgive the people who hurt you. The surgery was successful, but Julia's strength did not last. Even after the surgery, Ken did not come to see Julia. He was running away. Unable to face reality, probably what he would say. Less than a month later, surrounded by me and my parents, Julia passed away. Why does only Julia have to go through this? It would have been better if she hadn't been born at all. Next to me, standing dumbfounded, my mother cried out and collapsed to the floor. Just as my mother says, what was Julia born for? Such a short life, filled with nothing but suffering. Is there no God in this world? Or is this a trial given to me by God? I wanted to cry, I wanted to scream, but my emotions were frozen solid. A few days after Julia's funeral, the investigation, based on the DNA from the aborted fetus, progressed, and the perpetrator was caught. It was a male nurse working at the hospital. I was so angry, so furious, that for the first time, I screamed and cried loudly. I wanted to tear him apart with my own hands. Maybe my feeling of atonement for not being able to protect Julia was too strong. After the memorial service for Julia, when things had calmed down, I brought up divorce to Ken. We decided to have our last conversation in the house where we lived as a family of 3. I thought he would agree to the divorce smoothly, but Ken resisted. No! Why do we have to divorce? Julia is gone, and we can finally return to a normal life. I couldn't believe Ken could say such a thing so casually. Let's start over as a family from scratch. Julia left us this money thinking about our future. The compensation money is Julia's last gift to us. What? It seemed Ken had said something he shouldn't have. Any residual feelings I had for him vanished without a trace. Restart our family with money? Such words could only come from a monster. I know about your affair. You're living with her now, right? I have all the evidence. What are you going to do about her? The day Ken smirked about more money coming in, I had asked my father to hire a detective agency to investigate Ken. No, that's different. It was just for fun, like drinking. It was just to distract myself from the unbearable pain. I'm going to break it off soon. It wasn't serious. For just fun, it's been going on for 3 years. I had everything about the money investigated too. Ken had been sending $4,000 to his family until I took away the bank. Your sister is still not working, right? Ken was panicking. He probably thought the details wouldn't be discovered since he withdrew everything in bulk. I got a call before. Only $2,000 was transferred this month. They said they can't pay child support for your sister's child with that. In addition to sending money to his family, Ken was also paying the child support and the repayments his sister was charged with. I thought, since we're family, I should help out. Since Julia's money is also for the family, I figured a little bit would be okay. I sighed deeply. Ken had even rented an apartment for his mistress and was now supporting her living expenses. It can't be helped. She saved me. She supported me. She was my only escape. She was happy when I gave her money and relied on me. Because of that, I could face reality. Ken's reasoning infuriated me. What? You haven't been facing reality. You didn't visit Julia because you felt guilty, didn't you? You were scared to face her, running away from Julia, weren't you? But I truly love Julia. That's absolutely not a lie. I knew that, of course. Maybe Ken's heart had already broken over these 7 years. Maybe my heart is broken too. But I wanted him to stay as Julia's father until the end. You're weak and cowardly. When things get tough, you just run away. Return to a normal life after Julia is gone? That's impossible, coward. I will never forgive you. I was. In front of a sobbing Ken, I silently placed the divorce papers. And then I left the house we had continued to pay rent for, without either of us returning to it. Afterward, with a lawyer involved, Ken and I had another discussion and then we divorced. He agreed to deduct the money for the property division, alimony, and the money he misused personally. I thought my revenge was accomplished by finalizing our divorce. If Ken truly faced reality and started a new life with his mistress, then so be it, I was ready to forgive. But as expected, Ken avoided reality. Guilt towards me and Julia drove him to alcohol, and the woman, disgusted, left the house. Yes, I knew this would happen. With the money coming in, Ken quit his job and drowned in alcohol from morning, but such a life would quickly deplete the funds. Unable to stop drinking, he eventually couldn't pay the rent and returned to his parents' home. Now he's hospitalized for alcohol dependency treatment, with his sister working to contribute to the living expenses. My mother-in-law, begging for money, told me everything over the phone. Please, send money for his treatment. You have plenty, right? You're the only one we can rely on now. I was dumbfounded. Even after Julia's death, they were still eyeing her money. Ken and his sister, indecisive and trying to please everyone, were quite alike. It's not necessarily a bad trait, but the moment they stopped considering others, they had already lost their way. Weakness can be a strength, but also lead to evil. I don't have any money to spend on him. Everyone should pay for their own actions. Julia's money has been put to good use, and not a penny is left. I said and hung up the phone. After the divorce, I found a job and moved out of my parents' house. I subtracted the alimony from my husband and his mistress, and the remaining compensation money from Julia was all donated to a charity supporting children affected by traffic accidents. Even now, I sometimes think about what my mother said in the hospital room. Would it have been better if Julia had never been born? I can't definitively say that. It's something Julia herself should decide, and it's wrong for anyone else to label her existence as unfortunate. I am deeply grateful for having met Julia. The time spent together is irreplaceable and taught me so much. Bearing Julia's teachings in my heart, I plan to continue living my life, acknowledging my weaknesses and firmly facing reality. For a year now, I've been suddenly ignored by my husband and his stepson. One evening, as I returned from work, I overheard a conversation between Tom and Amy leaking out into the parking lot. Carrie, who we saw in town last year, was still as beautiful as ever. Dad, she had a great figure, right? Compared to someone at our house. I hate even hearing her voice. It's so annoying to have her wandering around the house. Well. Just think of her as a free housekeeper, okay? Tom laughed at Amy's words. That's right. Even if she's ugly, she still has her uses. Though I felt a surge of bitterness at their harsh words, there was no point in lingering outside forever. I tried to enter the house, but then I noticed something strange. The key wouldn't go into the lock. Perplexed, I checked the keyhole under the porch light and held my breath. The silver keyhole from this morning had been replaced with a golden one. In other words, locked out? As soon as I understood that, an intense anger I had never felt before surged up from the depths of my stomach. Ignoring me wasn't enough, now this? If they want me gone that badly, then I'll leave. No matter what happens later, don't come crying to me. I am Naomi, a 53-year-old housewife. I met my husband Tom 15 years ago at work. Back then, in my early 40s, I had given up on marriage, but as we worked together, I began to notice him as a man. One day, he confessed, "I like you. Would you date me with marriage in mind?" As our relationship progressed, I learned that he was divorced due to his ex-wife's infidelity and was raising a 9-year-old daughter named Amy. We deepened our bond by going to movies and amusement parks with his daughter, and a year later, we got married. I wondered if the strong bond between us and his daughter would help us navigate the challenges ahead. Initially, I was filled with such uncertainties. Since I worked full-time, I had evening shifts on weekdays. So, on weekends, I made sweets with Amy, helped with her homework, and took her shopping for clothes, striving to maintain a relationship like that of a real mother and daughter. I also made sure to spend quality time with Tom, going on dates for our anniversary and exchanging gifts on each other's birthdays. Initially, we got along well. But as Amy approached her teenage years, things began to look uncertain. The catalyst was a casual remark from Amy. "You know, you look kinda old." On the evening of the day we had a class observation, while eating pasta, Tom casually remarked, "Oh yeah, definitely. Most of your classmates' moms are roughly over 40, but they're beautiful." Tom responded with a smirk. Seeing his lewd grin, I furrowed my brows. Does Tom always assess other moms like that? What's with that? Jealous? But it's the truth, isn't it? Tom retorted sharply. Is it okay to say anything as long as it's true? Only toddlers are forgiven for saying everything they think. Some of them are dance instructors and beauticians, right? People in professions seen by others tend to look good. Hey Naomi, excuses from someone who doesn't make an effort are unsightly. Yeah, and lose another 10 pounds before you say anything. I was fed up with their arrogant remarks. I have an average body type. Yet according to Tom, I'm fat. I recently learned that Tom's ideal type is quite biased. Long straight hair, fair skin, distinct big eyes, very slim to the point of being too thin. And he criticizes women he sees on TV or in magazines one by one. That one's a supermodel, she needs to lose more weight. Oh, her, she gained weight around her hips after having a child. She looks past her prime. There he goes again. So, you are just your typical middle-aged dad with a bit of a belly. When I point it out, I get hit with incomprehensible logic like, men have it easy. Growing up watching a father like that, it's no wonder Amy prioritizes appearances. I heard from Amy that his mother used to be a model for mail-order magazines, and in the magazine she showed me once, there were slender beauties. Resembling his mother, Amy is also a slender beauty, and his friends consistently choose girls with slightly inferior looks. From Amy's perspective, being average-sized and average-looking like me, I must be nothing special. Dad, why did you marry Naomi? You choose a spouse based on personality. Ah, come on, shouldn't you consider looks a bit too? As I cleared away the dishes while the father-son duo criticized my appearance over the meal I prepared, I couldn't help but feel fed up. Despite both of us working, Tom never helps with household chores at all. When we got married, he said, "You can keep working as you have been," which made me happy, thinking he was an understanding husband. But as it turned out, he left everything to me as if it were none of his concern. Thanks to that, I find myself working tirelessly from early morning to late at night without any rest. After Amy graduated from school, we stopped going out together as a family, but with meal preparation and cleaning, the weekends fly by in the blink of an eye. Although I sometimes wish to watch TV or read a book, I don't even have time to sit down during the day. On the other hand, Tom and Amy crack open beers during the day, laughing uproariously while watching comedy shows. Hey, you two. Can you vacuum the living room and the Japanese-style room after the show ends? I asked during a commercial break, and both of them responded with a look of annoyance. Can't you see? We're busy. Dad, didn't you ask her to marry you so she could keep working? Then you should do your part. Yeah, housework is a housewife's job. If you're home all day, you should be able to do it. I usually back down at this point, but this time, I persisted with a gentle voice. Amy, you're 23, right? Shouldn't you start learning household chores to prepare for living on your own? In response, Amy glared at me with a scowl. Shut up, just leave me alone. Do you want to kick me out? Huh? I get it, you're jealous because Dad and I get along so well. You're such an idiot. Amy then wrapped her slender arm around Tom's chubby arm, spreading a malicious grin. Too bad. I'll always be in this house. I'll make you do all the housework even if you become a hunchbacked old hag. You'll continue preparing meals and doing laundry for Dad and me. That's right. Amy doesn't need to become a bride. She can just stay in this house. Tom breathed out a boozy breath, his face flushed as he frolicked around. But Naomi, she really has no redeeming qualities. Her face is ugly, her figure is terrible. Lately, she hasn't been going out much, but before, it was embarrassing to be seen with her. What a wife, huh? You shouldn't say that, Dad. As laughter erupted from both of them, I bit my lip and resumed peeling carrots. Unable to contain them, tears welled up and began to fall onto the marble-patterned countertop. A cute girl and a kind man who loves children. I was so happy to become a family with them, but now. I knew that remarriage with someone who has children would be difficult, but I never imagined it would be like this. For Amy, I'm just the woman trying to steal Dad away, so I can understand her attitude to some extent. But what's strange is that instead of reprimanding her, her father Tom willingly joins in mocking me. I thought maybe once Amy got past her rebellious phase, she might change her attitude towards me. So, I endured it for over 10 years, hoping things would improve. But now that Amy is 23, things have only gotten worse. And then, an incident occurred that I couldn't tolerate any longer. Even though we stopped celebrating, I always remembered our wedding anniversary. Every year, I marked it on the calendar, prepared a slightly extravagant menu, and quietly celebrated in my heart. Last year's anniversary menu was roast beef, fruit salad, and corn soup. This meat is delicious, isn't it? It has cheese in it. You know it's all about the meat. Any more servings? We've got plenty. Eat as much as you want. I remember vividly because it was unusual for them to give such a positive assessment. And then, the next day, they started ignoring me out of the blue. I have no idea why. When I tried talking to them as usual, for some reason, both Tom and Amy avoided making eye contact with me and quickly left the room. Maybe they didn't hear me? Or perhaps they're in a bad mood and don't want to talk to me? At first, I thought that way and kept trying to engage them in conversation. Good morning. It's clear skies now, but it's supposed to rain this evening. Don't forget your umbrella. Tom slurped his coffee without even lifting his head. Then Amy appeared and joined us at the table. Morning, Dad. Morning. Oh, you added pink highlights? Looks cute. Tom touched Amy's long hair with his fingers and squinted his eyes. Yeah, thanks. It's weird, though. It's sunny now, but they say it'll rain this evening. Guess we'll have to bring umbrellas then. Another day. I'm back. Here, this is a Bonkachin souvenir from my business trip. I tried talking to Tom and Amy, who were having dinner, but they remained silent with sullen expressions. I placed the golden box on the table and emphasized. It's from a really good bakery, so I want to have some too. Please save some for me. The next evening, when I returned from work and tried to have the bomkichin, it was nowhere to be found. With a bad feeling, I checked the trash bin and found the golden box and plastic bag thrown away. On the sink were plates and forks with food scraps from 2 people. Since that incident a year ago, I have still been ignored. I thought I might get used to it after a while, but it was quite the opposite. The longer it went on, the harder it became. Tom and Amy chat happily as if I'm invisible, never looking my way. Even if I shout, "Hey," loudly, they both remain unresponsive. I'd almost prefer being yelled at or insulted with "shut up," rather than being completely ignored. Yet, they throw remarks like "is dinner ready?" or "prepare the bath" as they pass by me, as if speaking to themselves. At such times, instead of being irritated by their selfishness, I feel miserable and pathetic for feeling excited that they talk to me, even in frustration. Does my presence in this house even matter? Should I just start living alone? But after finally becoming a family, going back to being alone would be lonely. One day, while I was brooding over these thoughts, I unusually came home on time. As I got out of the car and walked across the parking lot, I overheard a conversation between Tom and Amy from beneath the bay window. Because it was covered with a screen, their voices carried clearly. I wonder if she's finally thinking of leaving? Who knows? She better leave on her own 2 feet. If people hear that we teamed up to kick her out, it would look bad. I was dumbfounded to hear that they were concerned about appearances. Speaking of which, Carrie we saw in town last year was still as beautiful as ever. Tom spoke dreamily, and Amy echoed in agreement. Dad, she had a great figure, huh? Compared to someone in our house. Ever since then, I've hated even talking to Naomi. It's seriously annoying to have her wandering around the house. Well, you could think of her as a free maid, right? Even if she's ugly, she's somewhat useful. I was shocked by Tom and Amy's laughter. In essence, is it that he saw his ex-wife last year and was disillusioned by her beauty, so he started ignoring me? I shook my head and sighed. Maybe I can't go on with these people anymore. For now, I entered the house, had dinner, and then thought about what to do next. As I tried to open the door, I thought, the key wouldn't fit in the lock. Perplexed, I checked the keyhole under the outdoor light and swallowed hard. The lock, which was silver this morning, had been replaced with a golden one. So, does that mean I've been locked out? The moment I understood that, a rage I had never felt before surged from the depths of my stomach. Ignoring me wasn't enough for them. This is how they treat me? Unbelievable. If they want me out so badly, then fine, I'll leave. No matter what happens later, don't come crying to me. I returned to the car and started the engine again. It had been a week since I was locked out of the house, and I turned off my cell phone and left it untouched. I could imagine that I would receive countless calls and messages from Tom and Amy. I was completely fine with using my work phone for everything, so being locked out didn't bother me at all. I had my credit cards, a mobile battery pack, and my work laptop with me, so I bought necessities like underwear and clothes and ate at nearby cafes and restaurants, enjoying a comfortable hotel life. A week later, on my day off, I decided to turn on my personal phone out of curiosity, and I was bombarded with an incredible number of missed calls and messages. 90% were from Amy, and 10% were from Tom. I could guess the content, so I was about to turn off the phone again and leave it when I received another call from Amy. Reluctantly, I answered. "Oh, finally! Where have you been? It's so rude to suddenly disappear like that. Where are you?" "If you don't have anything important to say." "Wait, it's not. Naomi, please come back home," I replied sharply to Amy's urgent tone. "No way. You probably just want me to come back to clean up the mess at home, right? Why don't you tidy up with your beloved dad? He doesn't properly separate the garbage. He throws batteries with the burnable trash. He's always been like that. I don't want to ruin my precious day off. Bye." "I'm sorry. I apologize for everything that happened. Please come back home once." Her voice sounded like she was about to cry, and I couldn't help but sigh. I knew it would come to this, but why did they lock me out in the first place? I'll come back once because I need to pack my things. Leave the door unlocked. Yes. Thank you. I couldn't help feeling happy that they finally spoke to me after so long, which made me feel ridiculous. When I returned home, I saw Tom with a frustrated expression and Amy looking relieved at the dining table. The overflowing trash can in the kitchen emitted a foul odor. Beer and soda cans that Tom must have drunk were scattered on the living room table, along with empty bags of snacks and dried fish lying around on the floor. Tom's discarded shirt and socks were strewn across the living room floor, and the sink was piled high with dirty dishes and cups. It was a worse mess than I had imagined. I'm glad Naomi is back. Dad doesn't even know how to cook rice or use the washing machine properly, let alone how to separate garbage. He even finds it troublesome to press the button on the dishwasher. Amy lamented, and I retorted sharply. Of course he doesn't. He treated me like a maid and dumped everything on me. At least Amy seems to know that. I've helped out a few times when staying at my friend's house. Tom pouted in dissatisfaction. Housework is women's work, right? If Naomi isn't here, Amy can do it, Tom retorted with arrogance. Amy promptly countered. Listen, Dad, I have a part-time job too. I want to take care of myself. At the very least, you could do things like putting your dirty clothes in the laundry basket or rinsing out empty cans and throwing them in the trash. Huh? Isn't it natural for a daughter to take care of her father? Amy's eyes widened in response to her father's arrogant attitude. I didn't move in with you just to take care of you. If you have complaints, you can leave too. If I leave, this house will turn into a trash heap. Is that okay with you? It seemed that Amy had just realized Tom's traditional gender views. As I watched the two of them start a heated argument out of curiosity, Amy suddenly lashed out at me. Naomi, stop daydreaming and help with the cleaning. I didn't come here to clean up. I just came to get my things. What? I'm not so naive as to come back after being kicked out once. Ah, I was just kidding. Ignoring Amy's flustered state, I went to the bedroom. I packed my clothes, makeup and other belongings into my bag, and organized the rest of my stuff so that they could easily be transported by the moving company. Then, I left the house. It seemed that Amy had given up on making me help with the cleaning. For a while after that, my private phone remained quiet. I was busy with work and other procedures, so I lived in a monthly apartment for the time being and spent my weekends traveling here and there. It wasn't until about 3 months later that I received a perplexed call from Tom. Hey, what the hell is going on? Explain yourself. As soon as I picked up the phone, he started yelling in his usual commanding tone. For a moment, I considered just hanging up, but I wanted to see how he would react next, so I continued the conversation. What's up? Don't play dumb. A lawyer came by, demanding that we vacate the premises in a month. When the hell did you sell this house? Oh, about that. Do you think you can just go ahead and sell Dad's house without permission? I'll sue you. I couldn't help but laugh at Amy yelling on the other end of the line. I can do whatever I want with my own house. What? Forgot, huh? A few years ago, when I got promoted and my income increased significantly, Dad transferred the ownership of that house to me. Did he, Dad? Oh, now that you mention it. I was utterly dismayed by how they had completely forgotten such an important detail. Wait a minute, that's not what I heard. On the other end of the phone, Amy is complaining to Tom. She's on a low salary, half of my income is mine. So I'm the one feeding her. She always said that, right? Did she? It seems like another parent-child argument is about to erupt. Anyway, tell her to stop selling the house. Got it. In a panicked tone, he ordered before the call ended. By now, the two of them are probably arguing. I had a hunch that Tom was exaggerating his income to Amy, but hearing him say, "I'm the one feeding her," made me laugh. Even though I was the one paying most of the mortgage and living expenses. From the next day onwards, messages and calls demanding things like, "Prepare a luxury apartment for us to move into next," "Bad things will happen if you sell the house," and "Forgive us and come back soon," kept coming, but I ignored them and proceeded with the sale procedures. Some time later, when I went to check on the house, instead of being tidied up, it had become even more of a mess. "Hey, we're handing over the keys in 2 weeks. Is this condition okay? Have you arranged a new place to live?" Concerned, I asked, and Tom and Amy snapped back. "Shut up. If you're so worried, then you clean up." "Yeah, that's right. Couldn't hurt for you to help a bit, we're family." Who was the one who ignored and eventually locked out the family for a year? It's amazing how they can forget their own actions and still have the audacity to speak so freely. "Got it, I'll arrange it then." Since I got their consent, there's no need to hold back. I called a cleanup company and asked them to take away the garbage from the house. They're people who can't clean up after themselves. With the handover date approaching, I'm worried. "Don't worry, leave it to us." Thanks to the capable company, the house seemed to have been tidied up. I received a notification from the real estate agent that the two of them had moved to a 60-year-old wooden apartment, and I breathed a sigh of relief. Now that the house was sold, all that was left was to get divorced and receive compensation. However, it's obvious that there will be arguments with Tom. To deliver the final blow, I prepared in advance and invited Tom and Amy to the new apartment. "Wow, what a beautiful room. While we're living in a rundown 2DK apartment, you're living the high life." Right after we met, Amy started throwing sarcastic remarks at me, but I ignored them. Even though I've been working hard every day, being ignored and treated like a maid by them. I don't deserve any complaints just because I bought a nice apartment as a reward for myself. "Hey, when are you coming back? Amy's cooking sucks, you should prepare the meals." Tom makes a tactless remark while having our daughter cook. "Come on, Dad, it's tough enough to plan the menu and do the shopping. If you have a problem, cook it yourself." "What did you say? For a daughter, you're pretty cheeky." In front of the two of them immediately starting a fight, I filed for divorce. "Come on, let's get divorced. We'll have to discuss property division and compensation for your verbal abuse through a lawyer." Tom's eyes widened. "What? You must be joking." "Unfortunately, I'm dead serious." I smiled and informed him. "I'm fed up with being pushed around by you too. Let's break up. If you want a maid, hire one with your own money." "That's not gonna happen. I'm not signing any divorce papers." Crossing his arms, Tom reclined on the sofa, and I said in a cold voice, "Well, you can write it even with your eyes closed, can't you?" It's the 4th time after all. Tom's expression froze. Seated next to him, Amy stared at Tom with wide eyes, almost overflowing. "It's only the 2nd time. Can't you count, can you? The first wife, she got tired of your arrogance and left, leaving baby Yuri behind. The second one disappeared within less than a year, too." I recounted the facts I learned from the private investigator's surveillance. "You, who seem friendly and kind, were quite popular at the marriage consultation agency, right? You met model Carrie at the cafe and portrayed yourself as a charming father struggling with a baby, which led to marriage. However, after marriage, Carrie-san discovered your true nature. She got tired of it, especially after your infidelity. It turns out he had been paying Carrie a lump sum for the infidelity. When he lamented about not having savings at the time of marriage, it was actually offset by the compensation." Upon hearing this, Amy stood up and almost lunged at Tom with a questioning tone. "Wait a minute, I never heard about 3 moms. And didn't you divorce because of mom's infidelity?" "I didn't cheat." A firm voice echoed in the room. Amy and Tom, upon seeing the person behind the voice, were astounded. It was Carrie, standing at the door. "What? Mom? Why are you here? Because Naomi called me. She said she needed help dealing with the arrogant Tom and cheeky Amy. With a shrug that seemed to say, "Oh well," Carrie approached our table, casting a sympathetic glance at Amy. Tom's habit of lying hasn't been cured yet. Being raised by such a father would definitely warp your personality, Amy. Poor thing. I explained to the stunned Tom and Amy. When I revealed my identity and commented on the magazine website where Carrie-san was featured, I received a reply. That's how I consulted her about the current situation and received advice. Since Amy might still be skeptical of Tom's lies, I thought it best for the real person to appear. So Mom, is everything Dad said a lie? Nodding, Carrie replied gently to the shaken Amy. Naomi's story is true. I'm sorry I kept silent until now. But your biological mother isn't me. Oh no. Amy's shoulders slumped, and Carrie tenderly embraced her, gently patting her back. Even I, who had endured mistreatment, couldn't help but feel sorry for Amy. If it were me, I might have developed a deep distrust of people. The main culprit, who sat sullenly in front of us, was Tom. Despite the situation, he seemed unwilling to apologize, not even to our daughter. I regained my composure and pointed to the divorce papers with my finger. You'll hear from the lawyer tomorrow. You can sign and seal them once everything is settled. It'll cost us more if we drag this into court. Yeah. After much reluctance, Tom stood up with the divorce papers in hand. Amy, with a pale face, also rose and staggered towards the entrance. After they left, I thanked Carrie and saw her off outside the apartment. Tom received half the value of the house they had lived in until recently as part of the property settlement. However, it seems he's distressed because the compensation he has to pay me is much higher. There was even a big fight when he pleaded with Amy to pay half of the compensation. Despite managing to pay me the compensation in one lump sum, Amy moved out of the apartment and started living alone. Recently, she's been putting more effort into her part-time job and aiming to become a full-time employee to increase her salary. However, she used to leave all the household chores to me. Starting to live alone turned out to be more difficult than imagined, with balancing household chores and work being challenging, and managing finances proving difficult as well. Sometimes, when Carrie visits, it seems the apartment is in a state of disarray. Amy's recent catchphrase is, "Cut ties with Dad," and "I don't want to become like that adult." Despite the close relationship they once had, it's amazing how quickly things can fall apart. Tom's second divorce became known at his workplace, and the reasons spread, making it uncomfortable for him to stay. He ended up quitting his job and now lives a life of working multiple part-time jobs. Abandoned by his wives, daughter, and even his company, Tom seems to be living a lonely life in a rundown apartment. Meanwhile, I lead busy days with work. However, unlike before, coming home is no longer a burden. There's no longer any worry about being nagged or ignored. I feel incredibly happy living a carefree life, whether it's cooking pre-prepared meat at home or occasionally dining out at a nice restaurant. I wish I had divorced sooner without any hesitation. On weekends, I meet with Carrie to catch up and inquire about the current situation of Amy and Tom. It's partly my responsibility that she's so stubborn. I'll have to re-educate her from now on. Well, she's 25 now, so it might be difficult. With enough love, it'll be fine. Seeing me with a wry smile holding a cup of tea, Carrie clenches her fist. It seems she's found a new purpose in life. Now that I've finally gained my freedom, I plan to live my life as I please, without being tied down by anyone. You dare defy me, a worthless wife who's out of her league. John yelled, and then he threw me into the shed. I hit my hip on something that was lying around and groaned. Meanwhile, John had closed the door. The inside of the shed was enveloped in darkness in an instant. I rushed to the door. I banged on the door over and over. But the door did not open. John must have done something from the outside. The door was heavy, and I felt overwhelmed by despair. Is this my fault? No, I had been aware of John's flashy affairs since we were dating. But I turned a blind eye. Because I loved John. But there's a limit. And today was it. When I confronted John about the affairs, he flew into a rage, and here I am. I won't forgive him. No matter what, I'm going to get out of here and show John a thing or two. But I can't think of a solid plan. As I was overwhelmed with burning emotions, I heard the door open. I'm Susan Parker, a 44-year-old housewife. I live with my husband, John, who is 5 years younger than me. We don't have children. John didn't want them. I had dreamed of becoming a mother, but by the time we got married, I was already 35 and it was harder to get pregnant. But now I think, maybe it's better that we didn't have kids. John is just too problematic as a father, and I shudder at the thought of interacting with our child in my current mental state. I met John 12 years ago. I was 32, and John was still a young 27. He was a colleague at work, always admiring me. I was immediately attracted to John. He was handsome, bright, and sociable. But I could hardly call myself beautiful, and considering the age difference, I thought there was no hope. Then, out of the blue, John confessed his feelings for me. I couldn't believe it, but I was so happy that I immediately said yes. Our relationship started off well at first. John could tell I felt inferior about my age and looks, and he told me not to worry about such things. I was happy. It was a mystery why John chose me as his girlfriend, but as long as I thought he loved me, it felt like all my problems were solved. But that was naive. As our first anniversary approached, John's true nature began to reveal itself. John always used the same excuse that he forgot his wallet, making me pay for all our date expenses. We used to split the bill, so this was not only financially painful but also made me see John as dishonest for always using the same reason not to pay. Once, I tried saying I had forgotten my wallet before John could. This was right after we met up. John immediately said, "Go get it. Your house is close, right?" "Close? I came here by train. It's impossible." He just nodded indifferently, then turned his back on me. "John, if you don't have money, we can't go on a date. Let's call it a day." With a casual wave, John disappeared into the crowd. I could only stand there in shock, watching him leave. I began to feel uneasy about my relationship with John. I wondered if I could ever be happy with him. Even so, I couldn't leave John. I've only ever been in relationships with 2 men, including John. The first was during my student days, and we broke up before even half a year had passed. He found another girl. As for John, he's quite popular with the women at work. He knows it too and skillfully delegates his tasks to them. He hasn't done that to me yet, but who knows when he might change his mind. I became more and more timid. Even more, I became dependent on John. John would smile at me. He would speak sweet words. I deluded myself into thinking this was a privilege only for me, just to get through the days. But John never understood these desperate thoughts of mine. One day at work, I overheard John talking with another male colleague. "Susan? Yeah, I'm dating her. For now, she's the best option. She's older, but she pays for dates and sometimes gives me things like watches. I think she'd be good for marriage. The other 2 are too extravagant with money, so they're out of the question." 3 women. John was dating 2 other women besides me. Secretly, I hired a detective. I wanted to prove that what I had heard was a misunderstanding. But reality was cruel. John's other girlfriends were one from our office and another from a client company. In the end, after much contemplation, I decided to overlook John's extensive dating history. John chose me as his marriage partner. Perhaps because I catered to him and never complained about his whims. I believed that once we got married, John's bad habits would disappear. However, after the marriage, he started to be away from home even more blatantly. Upon investigation, I always found that John dated only women in their early to mid-30s. He must find it irresistibly attractive to be economically dependent on and to have women cater to his needs due to their insecurities. John had a girlfriend named Emily Turner. When Emily found out she was being deceived, she came to apologize to me first. "I'm really sorry. John said he was single." "It's okay. We're both victims," I said quietly. Emily is 35. The age I was when I got married. She has been dating John for 2 years. For a woman, that's a significant amount of time wasted on John. She was seriously considering marriage with him, which made it all the more pitiful. Emily promised to break up with John. I promised Emily that I would be there for her if she needed me. That day, John was fidgety. He was going on a trip to Hawaii for 3 days and 2 nights starting tomorrow. After he finished packing, John tried to head back to his room early. I was cleaning up after dinner when I suddenly spoke up. "I talked to Emily." "Huh?" John feigned ignorance as if asking who that was. He seemed determined to act as if he knew nothing. I spread out the documents I received from the detective on the table. "I've known all along, John, that you've been dating a bunch of women." "Susan, what are you doing?" John lost his temper. "Yeah, just like you found out. But what's wrong with that? I gave these women a nice dream. It's only natural that I get something in return." Emily was hurt. I shouldn't join him in his anger. I kept my cool. "She believed you were going to marry her. So, what? Are you gonna divorce me, Susan? Then maybe I'd consider it." "No, never mind. She's not attentive enough, and there are better options out there." "John." I was shocked. Honestly, I had expected John to blow up. But the fact that he could casually talk about divorce and weigh Emily as if amused by the situation was shocking. "Well, whatever the case, Susan, you knew what was coming for defying me, right?" "Huh?" I was confused. John was the one doing wrong. Yet, he acted as if I was the one who had broken the rules. He grabbed my arm, forced me to stand, and led me out from the porch to the yard. What stood there was a storage shed. I wondered what was going on as he stopped in front of the shed. Then he threw me inside. "This is what you get for defying me, a worthless wife," John shouted as he threw me into the shed. I hit my hip on something inside and groaned. "John, this has to be a joke." As I turned to say this, John had already closed the door. I was stunned and rushed to the door. It wouldn't open. John must have done something from the outside. Reflect on this. "I'm going out." "Wait. John, wait, you can't leave me locked up here." This was no time for reflection. I would get thirsty and hungry. If I can't get out, I'll wither away. And John was leaving for a trip tomorrow. What would become of me if left alone for 3 days? I thought he might let me out soon. But John's footsteps fade away, and the yard fell silent. The shed had no windows. With the door closed, the inside was pitch black. A sense of vulnerability was creeping up from my feet. Did I really do something so bad? I knew about John's pettiness. But I never thought it would go this far. Does John even care what happens to me? Maybe he really will leave me locked up here and go on his trip. That's when it happened. "Susan?" A timid voice came through. I was startled. The door opened. There stood Emily, John's ex-girlfriend. Emily said she came to see me. She rang the doorbell but got no response, and since the backyard was noisy, she came to check. "I saw John locking you up, hiding. It was terrible." "It's okay. I knew what kind of man he was and still chose to be with him, so this is my own doing," I told myself. "I'm glad you were here. But I was dating John. I underestimated you." "That's not true." I slowly shook my head. "You didn't know anything. You just loved John, that's all. Just like me." "Susan." Emily looked like she was about to cry and hastily wiped her tears with the back of her hand. To her, I said, "Emily, I need your help. Will you stand up to John with me?"
What?
Emily looked at me in surprise.
Stand up to John? What do you mean?
I'll explain that now. I beckoned Emily over. When I explained the plan, she looked surprised again, but she nodded in agreement. John was apparently visiting a friend's house. Once we confirmed he was not at home, Emily and I returned to the house. The plan began with John's return. The day he locked me up and the 3 days of the trip passed. John came out into the yard.
"Surely, everything is all right?"
He muttered in front of the shed. He must have calmed down and realized the gravity of what he had done. But it was too late.
"Hey, Susan. Time for reflection is over. You can come out now."
John opened the door of the shed. His expression froze at that moment. He rubbed his eyes as if doubting what he saw and looked into the shed again. The result was the same.
"What? Who are you?"
In front of John was a woman, not me, sitting with her knees hugged to her chest. In John's mind, I had been locked up all this time. It was impossible for someone to change clothes or hairstyle midway. The woman raised her head. John's face contorted even more.
"Emily, what are you doing here? Where's Susan?"
"Right here." I stepped out from where I had been hiding. At the same time, Emily stood up. Surrounded by 2 women, John looked back and forth between Emily and me, confused.
"What are you guys up to?"
"Don't worry. We won't lock you up.
We just want you to sit down and listen to what Emily has to say." "Emily's story."
John scowled, and Emily stepped back as if flinching. Yet, she didn't run away. She opened her mouth and said it all at once.
"John, I will be suing you for damages since you deceived me." "What?"
John seemed about to explode with anger, but he somehow held himself back. After watching his reaction, I said,
"John, I want a divorce." "You too? What do you two think you're doing, ganging up on me like this? You've been showing dreams to women, right? In return, you accepted their devotion. But it's time to return to reality."
Yes. This was our decision. To impose a financial penalty on John. But it didn't end there. John's smartphone rang.
"Hello, Dad? I'm in the middle of something, I'll call back later." "What? Apologize to Susan right now?" "No way, Dad. I've told everything to your parents."
John's face turned pale. Then, time flew by rapidly.
"John."
His father arrived from the family home, furiously scolding his son, John. I had sent all the documents I had received from the detective to his father.
"I heard everything from Susan. What kind of person are you? From today onwards, I'm cutting ties with you." "No, Dad."
John cried, looking at his father. But his father seemed resolute. He ordered John to pay the entire compensation to both women involved.
"Dad, don't be unreasonable."
John clung to his father.
"Please, I beg you. I'll change. So please, could you at least pay half?"
"Stop it." It was futile. "Susan, I'm so sorry. My son is a fool, but I never imagined he would go this far. He won't bother you anymore, I assure you. Please, don't worry about it." He left the next day. John was faced with a hefty alimony demand from the lawyer Emily and I hired, forcing him to pay a significant amount. John's bad reputation quickly spread among both our families. They whispered disownment, and it eventually reached his workplace. "I've been fired." "All right." I remained indifferent. John hung his head, repeating in a trembling voice, "I can't pay."
"How am I supposed to pay without a job? Cut off by relatives, I'm cornered."
"That's how it is, John. That's the feeling I had when you locked me up. Unable to go anywhere, do anything, cornered and left in the dark. Now, John was experiencing that despair. There was another fact John didn't know. Emily was pregnant. I was surprised. But more than that, I congratulated her. Congratulations. I know being a single mother will be tough, but I believe you can do it. Thank you. I'll do my best to be a good mother. We didn't want John's sins to be passed on to the child. We hoped the child would grow up straight and true, just like its mother. At the same time, I thought if I hadn't given up on convincing John, maybe we could have had another family member. I told Emily I wanted to meet the child once it was born and saw her off. A child, huh? I fiercely wished for a child of my own. After some thought, I decided to adopt a child once my life stabilized. Now that John was out of the picture, I continued living in our house, and there were part-time jobs available at a supermarket nearby. All right, time for me to step up. Life felt more vibrant with a purpose than before. I even made close friends at work, experiencing the joy of mutual encouragement. John had never been one to help me, so this sense of collaboration was refreshingly new. Then came the long-awaited adoption. The process and preparations were extensive and challenging, but I didn't mind at all. I had found her. Not related by blood, but undoubtedly my child. I knew at the moment I saw her. This is the one. The child recognized me as her mother. She innocently called me mom and showed affection. John, you wouldn't understand, but the joy of having a child is immense. This is my revenge. Moving forward with my life with my newly found daughter. I am not seeking affirmation from John's sweet nothings. Validating and believing in myself. As a person, as a mother. The manager at work said I always seem happy lately. He is 39. Coincidentally, he is the same age as John. But unlike John, the manager is unpretentious, sincere, and a bit clumsy. That's probably why I could open up to a man the same age as John who is nothing like him. You've adapted to the job so quickly, Susan, you're really dependable. Oh, it's all thanks to your guidance. I said, laughing. Then, for some reason, the manager blushed and looked away. Susan, do you have any plans for your next day off? That day, I'm planning to go to the amusement park with my daughter. Oh, I see. I wouldn't want to intrude then. What about your next day off? What's wrong? I had a feeling. The way the manager looked at me was kind. But at some point, that calmness disappeared, replaced by something else. Now I understand. It was the kind of emotion I once had for John. The manager took a deep breath and blurted out. Susan! Would you go out with me? What? From that moment, the manager. Michael became my partner. My daughter was wary at first, but after a few meetings, she warmed up to him. One day, while enjoying tea and snacks with Molly at home, the doorbell rang. Molly said, "Okay," and ran to the door. Then, she came back looking puzzled. It's someone Mom knows. What kind of person? Well, a tall man. At those words, I was startled. There was only one person I could think of. I sternly told Molly not to go out. He's a dangerous person. Got it. Molly sensed my tension and looked worried with her cute face. It's okay. Mom won't lose. I patted Molly's head and headed for the entrance. As expected, a certain person was standing there. Who's that kid? His first words weren't even a greeting. Even though it was so typical of John, I asked him, "What do you want?" "Lend me some money, Susan. You can see, can't you?" Indeed, John looked a complete mess at first glance. Since then, he apparently hadn't found a proper job and had been bouncing from one acquaintance's house to another. Eventually, nobody would take him in, and he ended up living on the streets. I don't have any money to lend you. Hey, Susan, you've become quite arrogant. Thinking you've beaten me? Life isn't about winning or losing. I thought, but John wouldn't understand. I felt no pity. It was only disgusting. John took a step closer. Susan, please. This will be the last time. I won't show my face again. I'll go to another state and start over. I just need the money for that.
I sighed. Not seeing him again would be a relief. But does that mean I should help this man?
Mom!
I heard Molly's voice and footsteps. I turned around in a panic. You shouldn't come here, I said to Molly, but she didn't stop.
Don't trouble Mom. If it's money you want, I'll give you some.
With that, Molly pressed 2 nickels into John's hand. John blinked in shock, then crumbled to the ground and began to cry. The innocence of a child. That was the happiness John had once rejected. Molly is going to start elementary school next year, so we went to look at backpacks. Michael was with us. As the 3 of us entered the store, the manager said, "What a lovely family." Molly smiled proudly, and Michael and I blushed.
Mom, I like this color.
Let's see. Molly had chosen an orange backpack. It suited the lively Molly well. This will be my gift, Michael said.
Oh no, that's not necessary.
I tried to argue against Michael's impromptu generosity. It's a once-in-a-lifetime gift. I want to give it. Then let's give it together. Molly said innocently. Michael and I looked at each other and nodded. All right. Yes, let's do that. So, we both contributed half and bought the new backpack. Molly was so happy that she didn't let go of the backpack all day. She even hugged it while she slept. Meanwhile, Michael had something to discuss with me. About the wedding venue.
I don't need a wedding, Michael. I didn't have one with John, my previous husband. I'm not of the age to wear a wedding dress anymore.
That's not true. I want to see you in a wedding dress. Michael insisted. I remembered John, who had grudged even buying a wedding ring, let alone wedding expenses. Michael was different. He proposed to me with a ring. Now, we are saving for the wedding.
Molly wants to see Mom in a dress too, right? Yeah.
Michael cleverly won Molly over to his side. I had no choice but to surrender with a smile. For the wedding, I embarked on a diet. Thanks to my efforts, I was able to wear the dress of my dreams, which made me very happy. I could never thank Michael enough for proposing the idea of the ceremony. During the wedding, Michael became so moved that he started crying, causing a bit of confusion among friends and colleagues. I ended up having to calm Michael down throughout the ceremony, but it turned out to be a wonderful and memorable event. After the ceremony, I sold the house I had lived in with John. There were memories, but they were all filled with lies from John. Michael's condo was small, but it felt right for our new beginning. At the center of the room, we displayed a wedding photo. Both Michael and I were smiling shyly at the camera. Molly started elementary school. Thanks to her personality, she seemed to fit in quickly with her school. When she comes home from school, she shares stories of her adventures and friends.
I came in first in the race.
That's amazing. Just like the daughter of me and Michael. Not just Molly, but Michael blushed too. I am deeply grateful for having met these two and becoming a family. My previous life was all about pleasing John, depending on him. It was my life, yet it felt like it was all for John. Now, I am living a life for myself. Not just for myself, but for Michael and for Molly as well. Our future is bright and shining. Starting tomorrow, we will be living together with Mom. Get ready for it.
Hey, don't just decide things on your own out of the blue.
What's the big deal? There's no other way.
My mother is old and can't live alone. But even so, you know what that woman has said to me and Jen all this time, don't you?
So what?
It's my fault for not handling things well. My mother wants us to live together. As her son, I have to fulfill her wish.
And so, the forceful cohabitation with my mother-in-law began. My name is Millie Taylor. I'm 39 years old. I have a daughter named Jen, who is 9 years old, with my husband Sam, who is 3 years older than me.
Whether it's because of our compatibility as a couple or some issue with one of us physically, Jen was born many years after we got married, and we haven't been able to have any more children since then. I'm fine with that. We both work, and having just one child is enough. But it seems my mother-in-law doesn't agree. Ever since we started living together, she's been blaming me every day for not having a second child and for not giving birth to a boy.
Why aren't you having a second child? Don't you want to have a boy?
I can't.
Besides, I'm satisfied just having Jen. You may be satisfied, but I'm not. Don't act all high and mighty, you wife who can only give birth to girls. And just one at that. Girls like her won't be of any use.
Why?
What's wrong with having girls? It's obvious, isn't it? Girls can't carry on the family name, they'll just get married off, and they're not cute or obedient.
That's not true.
Do you really think that about Jen too?
Yes, I do.
She's just as cheeky as you.
That's terrible, even though she's your granddaughter. Can't Sam say something about this?
Huh?
Why do I have to say anything? There's nothing wrong with what my mother is saying. I was shocked by his response. Sam should have cared about Jen. But my mother-in-law has been raising Satoshi single-handedly since her husband passed away when he was a child. I respect my mother-in-law for that, but Sam idolizes her like a god and doesn't know how to oppose her. He often says, there's nothing wrong with what mother says. For him, his mother comes before his wife and daughter. Things have only gotten worse since we started living together. It's because of bad soil that we can't have children other than Jen. Sorry for choosing a lousy woman, as you said, Mother. I wanted a son more than a daughter, you know. Sam, gleeful about disparaging me, pleased his mother.
Well, considering your age, you probably can't have any more kids, right? You're already 39, aren't you? Men can have children at any age, but women can't.
Yeah, that's right. Oh no, if I knew this would happen, I should have picked someone younger. Being disparaged by both of them made me very upset. But what worries me more is that their abusive words might reach the ears of my dear daughter. Lately, Jen, who has become as lively as a boy, went out to play soccer with her male friends at his house. Even on school days, she started coming home after playing soccer until her clothes were covered in mud. Perhaps she senses the tense atmosphere among the adults at home and doesn't want to come home as much as possible. Thinking about that makes me feel sorry.
I'll endure whatever you say about me. But please don't say anything bad about Jen. And you too, Sam.
What's the big deal? If you don't want to hear it, try having a boy.
Anyway, please don't say anything in front of Jen. If anything happens to hurt her, I won't forgive you.
I kept repeating that until I managed to get them to promise. And so, nearly a year has passed since we started living together. Even with incompatible relationships between daughter-in-law and mother-in-law, roles have been established as we live together, and gradually things are starting to run smoothly in the house. My mother-in-law's snide remarks have decreased lately. But recently, Sam's behavior has been clearly strange. He's been away from home much more often, and he never leaves his smartphone behind. Then one day, there was an unusual call on the smartphone, left carelessly unlocked, from a woman's name and an unfamiliar icon. When will you finally leave your wife? I became convinced. There's no doubt Sam is having an affair. I used my savings to hire a private investigator to look into it. The results were damning. Sam had been having an affair with a woman in her early 20s for months. What's more shocking is that the woman seems to be pregnant with Sam's child. What is he doing while having me and our daughter? But I had various anxieties about getting a divorce. My biggest concern was Jen. Despite being such a husband, Sam is the only father figure Jen has. He has also taken care of Jen, and they have fond memories together. Should I endure this to avoid depriving Jen of her father? But if things continue like this, Sam might choose the pregnant mistress over us. I was pondering this dilemma one day. When my mother-in-law and I were alone at home, she muttered disdainfully while watching a TV talk show. Having an affair while married is despicable. It's unforgivable. On TV, there was a feature on a scandal involving a married female celebrity having an affair. Hearing that, I thought to myself, maybe my mother-in-law would scold a husband who had an affair. If my husband, who believes mother's words are absolute, were scolded by my mother-in-law, he probably wouldn't have an affair again. I made up my mind and told my mother-in-law. Mother-in-law, it seems like Sam is having an affair.
What did you say?
I have evidence because I used a private investigator. And it seems like the other woman is pregnant. Then, my mother-in-law's face lit up with a joyful smile.
That's wonderful.
Huh?
Why are you surprised? Finally, my son's child is going to be born. It's wonderful, isn't it?
What are you talking about?
It's the child of his affair partner. It's not my child, his wife's child. So what? Either way, it's my son's child, and to me, it's a grandchild. Surely, this time it'll be a boy. But you just said having an affair is despicable and unforgivable.
You're silly. A man's affair and a woman's affair are different. In this case, it's your fault for being unable to satisfy your husband. But still, it's just as I said, isn't it? He goes and makes a child somewhere else.
Wait a minute. What do you mean? Are you saying that Sam's affair was encouraged by you?
Exactly. It's such a waste, you see. Because of you, Sam could only have one girl as his child. So I told him, why not just make a child somewhere else? You can't be satisfied with such a useless woman, can you? Seeking comfort elsewhere won't bring any consequences. A mother encouraging her son to have an affair. But anyway, now that a child is on the way, you need to get divorced quickly and have him remarried over there. I'm looking forward to having a new wife and grandchild. We'll discuss that when Sam gets back. I said that, but I had already prepared myself for divorce. After Sam and Jen returned home, I let Jen play games in another room and decided to talk with the adults. Despite his affair being exposed, Sam remained unfazed and even seemed defiant. So you figured it out, huh? I was planning to surprise Mother with the news.
Are you admitting it? Do you realize what you've done?
What's wrong with it? It's your fault for not being able to satisfy me as a husband. Are you seriously saying that? That you're not at fault for having an affair while having a child? Of course I'm serious. Above all, Mother said so.
You're like a robot controlled by your mother.
My words enraged my mother-in-law, and she slammed her fist on the table.
Shut up. Who are you to talk, you woman who's about to be thrown away? There are plenty of women like you. Get divorced right away, divorce. After all, the woman he's having an affair with is Angie, my friend's niece. She's much more thoughtful than you, Millie-san, and she's a young, cute woman. It's like a dream that she's willing to become my daughter-in-law.
Right. That's also why my mother-in-law is so delighted. Sam, think again. You cared for Jen, didn't you? Are you really going to abandon me and that girl? With all my hopes riding on it, I pleaded with Sam, looking into his eyes. Sam answered without hesitation. Yeah, I'm abandoning you. She's pregnant. I can't shirk my responsibility. Besides, she's having a boy. I found out today. For me and Mom, that's more important. Upon hearing that, my mother-in-law went into a frenzy.
Well, it's a boy after all. Making a boy with Angie, that's a real accomplishment.
As the two of them rejoiced, I fell apart. Was the time Sam spent with me and Jen really so worthless to him? Seeing that, my mother-in-law and husband laugh. Did you really think you'd be chosen? How presumptuous. Millie, you're such a fool. Did you really think Mom would scold me? There's no way Mom wouldn't take my side. Now, if you understand, write up the divorce papers. I've prepared for this moment. As expected, Mom, you're always prepared. I'll write it up first.
Sam confidently fills out the divorce papers with messy handwriting. Next, it's my turn. The pen feels as heavy as lead.
Now, the wife who's been abandoned by her husband shouldn't brazenly stay in the house. Hurry up and leave, and take your daughter with you.
When I turn around, Jen is standing anxiously at the entrance to the room, looking at us. I feel a chill run down my spine. When did she start listening to our conversation? Please stop. Don't let Jen hear this kind of talk. It's fine. She's going to find out soon enough that we're getting divorced. Jen, Daddy got another lady pregnant. Daddy and I chose that child and that woman, not you and Mom.
Please stop. You promised not to say mean things to Jen.
I don't care about that. Sometimes you just have to be clear about these things. Now, instead of that, hurry up and pack your things and leave. Move out right away. A capable new wife and a cute grandchild are coming. The cute grandchild. Those words indicated that to my mother-in-law, Jen wasn't the cute grandchild. A chill ran through me. I understand. I've already packed up and called the moving company, knowing this would happen. Oh, that's fast, isn't it? You're usually so slow, but you're quick when it counts. Well then, farewell, Millie, Jen. We've had some decent times until now. But I'm going to have even more fun from now on. I'm looking forward to it. Living together with Angie from now on. Soon, the moving truck arrived. The movers carried out my packed belongings one by one, and seeing this, the two of them revealed their joy. Sam, mother-in-law, could you come to the truck for a moment? Huh? Why do we have to do that? I'm fine. After all, I'm technically Jen's father. I'll see them off at least. Yes, then I'll see them off too, at least for the last time. The four of us stood by the truck. As Jen looked up at us anxiously, holding my hand, I stroked her head reassuringly. Now, hurry up and get on board. What are you doing? Are you so reluctant to part ways? But too bad. This house belongs to the new wife and grandchild now. I exchanged nods with the movers. Sir, madam, please get in. The mover's voice was firm, tinged with suppressed anger. Huh? Why should we get in?
Yeah. You've got the wrong people.
No, I haven't made a mistake. Please get in. The mover attempted to push the two onto the truck.
Hey, what are you doing? Those two are supposed to get on the truck. Them. That's right. Are you even listening to us?
The two struggled and resisted. Unable to reach an agreement, I shoved them into the bed of the truck. I tossed their wallets and phones onto the bed afterwards.
Why? What are you doing? Hey, let us out of here.
The mover chuckled at the scene and immediately drove off. The truck shrank into the distance rapidly. Jen waved to the struggling pair. Bye, Dad, Grandma. There was a hint of brightness in her voice. I stroked Jen's head once more and held her hand as we entered the house. Shortly after, I received a call from my mother-in-law.
What is this all about? It's supposed to be you two leaving, not us.
No, it's you who are leaving.
What? How dare you think of kicking out my husband and me? That house belongs to Sam. And yet, here you two are, squatting in it.
Mother-in-law, you seem to be unaware of something. What? This house doesn't belong to Sam. It's my house.
What? Don't lie to me.
This house was originally inherited from my father and is in my name. What nonsense. I heard Sam bought this house. Sam tends to boast to you, so he might have lied.
Sam wouldn't lie to me. Right, Sam? It's a lie, isn't it?
Then, Sam, who seemed to have overheard the conversation, responded in a trembling voice. I'm sorry, Mom. What Millie said is true. That house is in Millie's name. Why?
Why would you lie? I just wanted to show off. I wanted to make it seem like I had become successful enough to buy a house. I mean, living in a house under your wife's name, isn't that embarrassing? Eventually, I even forgot that it was a lie and that the house was in Millie's name. So, you won't be allowed to enter this house ever again. Oh, and Sam, I assume you're listening and understand, but you'll be paying alimony for the affair and child support for Jen, too. Alimony, child support. Yes. We'll hire a lawyer to make the claim. Surely, you didn't start an affair and bring up divorce without being prepared for that, right? Sam fell silent. In her place, my mother-in-law started yelling. Don't lie. You're deceiving us, kicking us out, taking over the house, and now you want our money too? This is outrageous. We're not deceiving anyone. We never said you had to leave. Taken over? I'll say it again, this house is mine, inherited before our marriage, so it's not marital property. We'll be taking alimony and child support from Sam, though. More importantly, where is this truck even headed? This road, could it be? You talked about looking forward to living with Angie, didn't you? So, we're sending you off to her place. How about that? Aren't I considerate? How do you know Angie's address? I used a private investigator to find out. Oh, and by the way, the mover driving the truck is my brother. Your brother? Yes, he hardly ever shows up and had his hat pulled down low, so you wouldn't have noticed, would you, Sam? My brother heard the whole story, got furious, and gladly helped me with my plan. Trying to escape would be useless, so there you have it. Well then, best of luck to you. I hung up the phone while listening to the screams and shouts of the two. Daddy and Grandma won't come back anymore, right? Jen, who seemed to have been listening to fragments of the conversation, asked to confirm. Not with an anxious expression, but with a look of relief. Despite her young age, it seemed she had some thoughts about the situation. That's right. They've moved away. I smiled as I answered, and Jen smiled too. The events afterward were told to me by my brother. Apparently, when they arrived at the mistress's house, she was in the midst of a passionate affair with a young man. In the midst of this chaos, my mother-in-law and Sam burst in, turning it into a complete scene. Man, I really wanted to show you the hellish scene of that pandemonium. My brother said to me with a laugh. Soon after, I hired a lawyer and managed to get a lump sum of alimony and child support from Sam. We also decided to move to ensure they wouldn't follow us. It was painful to let go of the house where my parents had lived, inherited from my father, but there was no other choice. My brother then offered to exchange his own house for ours, so they wouldn't be able to trace us. Originally, he hadn't inherited it because he already had a house of his own, but apparently, he had wanted this house too. I gladly accepted the exchange. If it's my brother's house, then I feel at ease. Plus, both Jen and I are already familiar with it. Jen also seems to be relieved that she won't have to change schools. With my muscular brother around, I'm sure he can handle those two if they ever show up. He even said he'd offset the cost of buying the house, so we only had to pay for the moving expenses. I truly have nothing but gratitude for my brother. Moving and changing the locks, things finally settled down. It was then that I noticed a change in Jen's behavior. Before, Jen preferred wearing pants over skirts, had a boyish style, kept her hair short, played soccer with the boys, and preferred superhero shows over girly cartoons. But after the divorce and the move, she suddenly started wearing skirts more often, wanted to grow her hair long, invited girlfriends over, and started watching girly cartoons. I wondered if she had developed a crush on a boy or something, so I asked Jen about the reason for her change. Her response was unexpected. Well, both Dad and Grandma like boys and dislike girls, right? That's why I couldn't invite my girlfriends over, and I thought if I acted more like a boy, they might like me a bit and Mom wouldn't get mad at me. But in the end, both of them left anyway. I was shocked. I never intended to let Jen know how much she was hurting in front of her. At least, that was the promise. But I hadn't been watching over them all the time. They were having conversations about urging infidelity behind my back. Moreover, we had been living under the same roof all that time. There was no way she wouldn't have noticed that her grandmother didn't like her, that her father was siding with her grandmother, and that I wasn't getting along with them. With her young and delicate heart, she must have sensed various things and suffered. What was I, as her mother, doing without noticing it? Acting as if I were the only one suffering. Now that Dad and Grandma are gone, I'll stop trying to be like a boy. But I wonder if we could have all gotten along if I had been a boy. Regardless of her grandmother, there were good memories with her father, so it must be complicated for her. I hugged Jen, whose face clouded over. That's not true. You've done nothing wrong, Jen. Grandma was always a mean person. Dad just followed whatever Grandma said. It's been like that since before you were born. Let's forget about those two. You can be whoever you want to be, Jen. Mom loves you just the way you are. Jen hugged me back. It's okay for me to be a girl, right? Of course. I'm sorry for making you sad all this time. I apologized and vowed to make Jen happy, even as a single mother. Since then, there have been disputes among my ex-husband, ex-mother-in-law, and his mistress, but in the end, they decided to live together in a cramped apartment for the sake of the child they had together. My ex-mother-in-law had some issues with the friend who was her mistress's aunt, and they drifted apart. 2 years flew by in the blink of an eye. Jen and I are living a comfortable life together. At 11 years old, Jen has become quite the young lady, and she even helps with household chores, which is a big relief for me. At that moment, I received a call from my ex-husband, Sam, out of the blue. Millie, where are you and Jen right now? I'm at your old place, but I can't get in. Hurry back home. We've long since let go of that place. It belongs to someone else now. You better leave before the current residents return. I didn't mention that the current resident was my brother. Then tell me your current address. I'll come over right away. No, I won't. Why should I tell a stranger like you? I'm not a stranger. We're ex-spouses, and I'm Jen's father. You abandoned both Jen and me. Our ties were severed back then. Don't say that. Even if you don't want to see me, Jen must want to see me. She's my only child. Actually, she doesn't want to see you at all. In fact, she's been more lively and herself since you two left. But being a single mother must be tough. Not at all. I'm earning more now than I did with you. Thanks to that, we can live comfortably. But I should still be there, shouldn't I? I'll cut ties with my mother. I've had a change of heart. Let's remarry and live together again. I was stunned. I'm surprised. You, of all people, cutting ties with your mother? What's going on? And earlier, you called Jen my only child, right? But you should have a son with that woman. What happened to him? Well, that. He wasn't my child. Sam's story went like this. Even in their frosty marriage, a child was born safely. His mother-in-law doted on the baby boy. But from the beginning, there was a sense of unease about a child who didn't resemble him much. He convinced himself that it was inevitable for a baby, but as the child grew, the discomfort grew as well. When he consulted a colleague, he was told something like this. Come to think of it, I read a story like this before. A man blamed his ex-wife for not being able to have children, divorced her, and married another woman. He was blessed with a child, but it turned out his ex-wife had also remarried and had a child. The real cause of infertility was on the man's side, and the child born to the new wife was from a surrogate. Maybe you're in a similar situation. At that moment, Sam remembered the young man he had seen his lover with. Although timing-wise, there was no doubt the child was Sam's, despite his mother's encouragement, why had he so easily believed it? But I'm not infertile. I have a daughter with my ex-wife. She looks just like me. Then maybe it's not can't have children, but hard to have children. That daughter might be the only one you could have besides her. Yeah. Plus, my daughter was born years after we got married. Still, it's strange how your lover got pregnant right after the affair. It's a weird story. It could be that your ex-wife had an issue. Well, you'll find out once you get tested, won't you? Filled with doubts, Sam immediately went for a test. As a result, as Sam's colleague had said, it turned out that Sam had difficulty having children. And when a DNA test was conducted, it was confirmed that the child was not Sam's. When Sam confronted his wife, she readily confessed.
I'm sorry, forgive me. There was a time when I was forced against my will. Maybe that child is from that time.
Forced?
How can I believe that? You were adamant that it was definitely my child. We had an agreement with that man. It must be his child. No, it's different. We used contraception, and the timing doesn't match.
I don't care anymore. Anyway, it wasn't my child, so I can't raise a child who isn't mine. Please, let's get divorced. However, surprisingly, it was Sam's former mother-in-law who opposed this. Well, it's not the child's fault, is it? If Angie is also repenting, let's forgive her and continue as a family. If she was forced, then it's a pity. Mom, are you saying I should be the father of a child who isn't biologically mine? I absolutely refuse. But even though he's not biologically related, he's the long-awaited son and the successor. I can't bear to part with such a cute child. I'm worried about our retirement, too. Anyway, you have difficulty having children. So, why not become this child's father? You'll listen to my wishes, won't you? Sam seemed taken aback by his former mother-in-law's confident expression.
She's right. Even without a blood connection, we can still be a parent and child. Shut up. Mom, I've misjudged you. In the end, you were more concerned about yourself than me. That's not true. I was thinking of your well-being. What's for my well-being? Falling for a woman like this, separating from Millie and Jen, it's all because of you. And even when you found out about the surrogate, instead of supporting me, you demand that I raise the child. I'm cutting ties with a mother like you who demands that. What did you say? This must be a joke, Sam. You're cutting ties with me.
After such exchanges, Sam stormed out of the house and decided to start over with me and Jen.
I was wrong. Millie was right. I've been blindly following my mother like a robot. From now on, I'll change. Let's start over as a family of 3.
Stop kidding. It's too late to realize it now. It's no excuse to say you were just obeying your parents like a child at your age. Understand, will you? For years, I only had my mother. If she's gone, we can manage just fine. So, if you keep going on like this, I'll call my brother to come and kick you out. Upon hearing those words, he seemed to be intimidated and immediately hung up the phone. Pathetic, I thought. After that, it seems Sam got divorced and became a twice-divorced man, leaving the house. His former mother-in-law blamed her estrangement on her daughter-in-law and apparently they quarreled every day. Concerned neighbors reported the situation, and the children ended up going to child services. The biggest victim in all of this is the child who's being tossed around because of the adults' issues. Though it's none of my business, I hope they find happiness. I too have become a single mother like my former mother-in-law, but I want to raise Jen without hindering her independence, learning from the twisted parent-child relationship of my former mother-in-law and ex-husband.
Hey, Lisa.
As I'm enjoying shopping for daily necessities, I'm called from behind like that. When I turn around, there's David. Seeing him, I can't hide my displeasure on my face. Don't look like that. You were married, huh? Good for you, David says, putting aside everything he's done, as if it's none of his business. That's right, he was someone without any tact. I let out a big sigh. Unperturbed, David keeps staring at us. Anyway. Then he stares at Michael's clothes and smiles with a smug look. My wife is a beauty and a doctor. Your husband looks kinda poor. David, looking down on us, smirks while ridiculing our clothes. Then Michael opens his mouth with a fresh, bright smile.
Oh, then she's fired. What?
Ignoring the stunned David, Michael takes my hand and starts walking.
Let's give him what he deserves. Yeah, thanks.
And so, we decided to settle our past. My name is Lisa Miller, a 45-year-old housewife. Currently, I live with my husband Michael. I'm just an ordinary person, but I'm good at handicrafts. In fact, my life is actually on its second round. Not in some unrealistic way like reincarnation. It's just that I had broken off an engagement once, and then met and married Michael, so it's my second go-around. I met Michael after my divorce, and we started dating and got remarried after he approached me. He's a very quiet and kind man, and I truly feel glad I remarried. On the other hand, I think it was good I didn't marry the person I broke off my first engagement with. The reason for the engagement breakup was the other person's infidelity. My former fiance David had been a childhood friend since we were little. David, ambitious and aggressive, often belittled plain me. Yet, he often protected me from boys who teased me, and he was a reliable presence. Since our families lived next door to each other, it wasn't too surprising that we, who had been together since elementary, middle, and high school, started dating. Our parents were also good friends and were very supportive and cooperative with our relationship. Therefore, talk of marriage came up early, and we started living together right after graduating from college. However, while living together, I started to see more of David's bad side.
Hey, hurry up and make dinner. Sorry, I just got home. You're so slow. Never mind, I'm going out to eat. Aw, David.
At that time, I was working and often came home later than David. But David seemed not to like that and would impose unreasonable demands whenever I got home, then just go out on his own. Living together without being able to have a proper conversation was very hard. Yet, I was determined to marry David and tried to find a way to start conversations.
Hey, how about we go for a picnic after a long while? Go by yourself. Then, how about a movie? Not in the mood.
No matter how much I tried to invite him on a date, David would not listen to me at all. Instead, he rejected all my suggestions. I became so sad that I gradually stopped speaking. Then, taking advantage of that, David began coming home later.
Have you been drinking?
It's none of your business.
None of my business. We're going to get married, right?
When I rarely talked back, David, annoyed, scratched his head and uttered shocking words.
Our engagement was a failure. What?
Because you have nothing going for you. David said this with a sneer, looking over at me. I was dumbfounded, staring back at David. Not particularly cute, average figure, not outstanding at work. And then there's the housework. Anyway, just plain ordinary.
That may be true, but...
Cutting off my words, David continued.
It's annoying because our parents are close, can't even break it off with you, really drew the short straw. That way of speaking...
Just shut up. David said that and ended the conversation on his own terms, then went into the bedroom and locked the door. Since it's a one-bedroom apartment, we share the bedroom. Without access, I don't even have a bed to sleep in.
Open up!
I called out to the room several times, but only David's snoring could be heard from the bedroom, with no sign of him waking up. Eventually, I had to spend the night on the living room sofa with a throw blanket. 2 months later, my conversations with David had practically dropped to zero. I couldn't continue the relationship any longer. I somehow felt that way. Luckily, we weren't married yet, and I was working. It would be a bit of a strain, but I could move out. Every day, I browsed rental listings, waiting for David to bring up breaking up. But David never brought up breaking up. Instead, whenever he went to his parents' house, he would always praise me highly. Really, I'm totally saved by Lisa. The place is clean, and her cooking is good. I really think I'm lucky. I feel the same. I've been thinking since you were kids that I'd be happy if Lisa would marry you. Lisa is so absent-minded, you know. Please take care of her. David and my father, who get along well, said this and laughed heartily. I watched such scenes with a dismayed look. My mother also places her full trust in David. Is there no one in this house on my side? David had managed to win over everyone around him. Do I have no choice but to marry David? I felt desperate, but then, suddenly, an opportunity came. Hey, let's break up. What? One day, as usual, I was cleaning the kitchen when David, who had been drinking tea, spoke up. Caught off guard by the breakup coming up in our first conversation in a long time, I was at a loss for words. Yet, as I was about to agree, the words David continued with left me speechless. Met a cute girl at a mixer a month ago. A 25-year-old doctor. I'm gonna move in with her, so move out. I couldn't understand what David was saying. He hadn't broken up with me simply because he hadn't found someone else, it seemed. According to David, he can't do housework, and he'd be in trouble with things like rent if he had no one. That was his reason. That's terrible. What? It's fine. Oh yeah, she's moving in next week, so get out fast. That's impossible, all of a sudden. As I raised my voice, David also raised his in defiance. Shut up. It's your fault for being so slow. Don't slack off on the housework until you leave, got it? After glaring at me, David went outside, making a phone call to someone. Left behind, all I could do was stand there in stunned silence. Then, I packed up my belongings and went back to my parents' house. At first, my parents thought I had upset someone or had a fight, but they became angry after hearing my story. A meeting was arranged between both families. On the day, David showed up at his parents' house with an unfamiliar woman. My parents, even his parents, and I all stared at her dumbfounded. Then, the woman began introducing herself with a triumphant look. Nice to meet you, my name is Ashley. I'm in a relationship with David with marriage in mind. Marriage? Yes. He's already planning to break up with that lady there, right? I don't think there should be any problem. What do you think? Ashley said this and then looked at me and sneered through her nose. As if she was proud of having one. No matter how mild-mannered I was said to be, I'm human too. I get angry too. David is dating me. We're already engaged. Isn't this incredibly rude? So what? You're breaking up, right? Oh, you want alimony? How much do you want? It's not about that. Outraged by such disrespectful words, I raised my voice. Defending me as if, David's mother glared at Ashley. I'm opposed to this. I can't forgive anyone for hurting Lisa, who's like a daughter to me. David, and you too, stay out of our lives from now on. Mom, are you sure? This woman is a doctor, you know? She's rich? David said, pointing at Ashley. David's mother looked at him with utter disdain and sighed deeply. Then, David's father joined in quietly. I agree with her. Rich or not, it doesn't change anything. We'll have nothing more to do with you from now on. Oh, is that so? Well, don't expect any help from me in your old age. David yelled this, then stormed off, pulling Ashley by the arm. We waited until David was out of sight before entering his parents' house. As soon as they sat down in the living room, they apologized deeply. We're really sorry about all this. Don't apologize, it's not your fault. My parents and I kept saying this, stopping David's parents from apologizing. We agreed to continue our relationship, decided to call off the engagement, and David was disowned. David's parents were genuinely sad that I wouldn't become their daughter-in-law. We couldn't become family, but please rely on us in the future. That's right. We'll make sure he pays the alimony properly. Just ask us for anything. Grateful for their words, I decided to restart my life. The next week, David and Ashley had transferred the alimony to me. The alimony was more than I expected, so I decided to quit living at my parents' house, change jobs, and move far away. I used that money for the move and still had enough left to comfortably search for a new job in my new location. 2 months after breaking up with David, I started a new job. 2 years later, I met Michael, who would become my husband. My workplace deals with medical equipment, and Michael is the son of a client. We happened to frequent the same cafe. I would knit small items while drinking coffee, and Michael would be reading a book. Our relationship, where we didn't interfere with each other, changed when Michael started talking to me.
What are you making?
Excuse me? Though surprised by his sudden approach, we gradually started talking more and realized we had work-related connections. Moreover, we both had same hobby, which also became a topic of conversation. Things moved quickly, and we started dating. 2 years later, I introduced him to my parents, and we decided to get married.
I'll make you happy for the rest of your life. Thank you, I look forward to it.
At the peak of happiness, we enjoyed our newlywed life. That doesn't mean we did anything fancy. I quit my job and became a full-time housewife, busy with household chores. Michael, while working, would also help with the housework.
Lisa, are you tired? I'll take care of everything today, so you just rest.
Michael would say, and take care of everything from cooking to washing on his days off, filling me with gratitude. And on our 5th year of marriage, we decided to buy a house. By coincidence, the towns where Michael's and my parents lived were next to each other. After many discussions with Michael, we purchased a house exactly halfway between our parents' homes. It was in a residential area with supermarkets, a perfect quiet ambience for us. And once we had settled in after the move, we visited the supermarket on a weekend.
Lisa, you like paella, right? I'll make it for you. Really? Thank you.
Michael's paella is exquisite. Excited, I browsed the supermarket for ingredients and then headed to the household goods section.
Hey, Lisa.
As I was enjoying shopping for daily necessities, I was called from behind like that. When I turned around, there was David. Seeing him, I couldn't hide my displeasure on my face.
Don't look so upset.
You were married, huh? Putting aside all he has done as if it's none of his business, David says that. That's right, he was someone without any tact. I let out a big sigh. Unperturbed, David keeps staring at us. Anyway. Then he looks at Michael's clothes and smiles smugly. My wife is a beauty and a doctor. Your husband looks kinda poor. David, looking down on us, smirks while ridiculing our clothes. Then Michael opens his mouth with a fresh, bright smile.
Oh, then she's fired.
What? Ignoring the stunned David, Michael takes my hand and starts walking.
Let's give him what he deserves. Yeah, thanks.
And so, we decided to settle our past. The next day, I received a call from an unknown number on my phone. I called out to Michael in another room before answering the call. It was David on the line.
Hey! What's going on?
What do you mean?
Ashley was actually fired.
David raised his voice from the other end of the line. However, I remained unfazed. Sensing my calm, David yelled again, his voice filled with irritation.
What's up with your husband?
That's when I decided to reveal Michael's profession to him. Taking a deep breath, I spoke up.
Well, he happens to be the director of the hospital where your wife worked.
Director? David repeated after me, then fell silent. But a few seconds later, he burst into laughter.
Don't joke around.
Joke?
Come on, no way that guy in cheap-looking clothes is a director.
To that, I laughed out loud.
Cheap-looking? Those are actually top-tier designer clothes, you know? What?
David's foolish voice reached my ears. Indeed, Michael prefers wearing simple clothes. That doesn't mean he's wearing cheap clothes. In fact, what Michael was wearing was a one-of-a-kind, custom-made t-shirt or something from an ultra-luxury brand's limited edition. In contrast, David has always preferred brand names not for their quality but just for their fame. He used to favor clothes with big logos of brands, as I remember. So, when he saw Michael's clothes without any logos, he probably thought they were non-branded. But what Michael wore that day was indeed a one-of-a-kind, custom-made piece. Judging it as cheap really just shows he has no eye for quality. He was wearing an expensive, one-of-a-kind piece. You just don't have an eye for it. What? Don't be pretentious. Don't you know the designer's name? When I mention the designer's name, David is speechless. That designer only makes one-of-a-kind pieces, and their works are said to be worth over $20,000 each.
No way! That cheap-looking guy.
That's why he's a director, Michael Miller.
Anyone can claim any name.
David still wants to claim it's all a lie, raising his voice. To that, I respond calmly. Then, check the website. His photo is there.
If you're lying, this won't end here.
David seems to access the website while keeping the phone connected. Then I hear a tiny scream.
Your husband really is a director.
Told you. That's how it is.
Hey, wait!
What? David tries to hold me back, so I reluctantly respond. Then David starts to speak in a coaxing tone.
As a director's wife, can't you just cancel Ashley's dismissal? Come on, for an old childhood friend and ex, do me this favor?
His blatantly selfish request leaves me more astounded than angry. Who in the world asks their husband to undo the dismissal of their ex-fiance's affair partner? I firmly reject his plea.
That's impossible. First off, my husband doesn't fire people out of personal vendettas. But,
well, the dismissal yesterday just happened to be the last straw, but there must have been a reason for your wife's dismissal, surely. David seems stunned on the other end of the line. Ignoring him, I hang up. Michael, who had been listening by my side, nods kindly. Smiling at Michael, I then set David's number to block. A few days later, I receive a call from someone I haven't heard from in a while. I can't help but give a wry smile at the content of the call. Okay, I'll arrange a meeting for discussion. With that, I end the call. Then, I explain the situation to Michael and ask for a meeting to be arranged. We send David and Ashley a document by mail specifying the date and time. Michael has received several calls from Ashley, but he never answered them, just recording the call history. Better not go out too much until the meeting. I'll handle the shopping.
Okay, understood.
Michael won't tell me the reason no matter how many times I ask. But I trust there must be a reason if it's coming from Michael, so I decide to stay home. And then, the day arrived. Michael and I headed to the designated traditional restaurant ahead of time. David and his wife entered the room right on time. Ashley, upon seeing me as she entered, for some reason, had a triumphant expression. Let's start the discussion, shall we?
Sorry, Director. Today we are discussing the reversal of my dismissal, right?
Ashley interrupted Michael to push today's agenda. Michael, without changing his expression, ignored it and started discussing the real agenda. Today's discussion is about the prohibition of any further stalking from David towards Lisa, and from Ashley towards me.
Wait a minute, when have I ever stalked? And why Ashley too?
David said, hitting the table with a thud. The water in the cups trembled and spilled over the table. The room fell silent for a moment. Michael was the first to speak up. That's exactly it. You've been loitering around our house recently, haven't you?
What are you talking about? You were caught on the security camera. You were there this morning too.
I was surprised to hear this. According to Michael, David had been loitering around our house since our last phone call. Our house is quite large and noticeable. That's probably why David could easily locate it. As Michael finished explaining, Ashley showed her anger.
What do you mean? You've been loitering around your ex's place. It's not what you think, there's a deep reason. What kind of reason could there be? So, what about you?
following around Lisa's husband, what's that about?
David retorted, and Ashley awkwardly looked away. Then, Michael began to explain again.
Claiming to be my mistress without permission, trying to get into my car, bringing homemade lunches. Even after I told you multiple times to stop, you didn't, and it was very troubling. What? The lunch was something a colleague asked me to make. Hey, Ashley. What's this about?
David shook Ashley by the shoulders. Ashley glared at me with a sulky face.
Knowing the wife was David's ex-fiance, I thought I was smarter and more beautiful than her. The director is richer than you. So you were trying to cheat. It's my business, right?
The two of them started arguing for selfish reasons, and we just watched them in disbelief. After a few minutes of arguing, they finally quieted down. Yet, they were still breathing heavily and glaring at each other.
Anyway, I'd like both of you to stop the stalking. This dismissal was triggered by Ashley following me around and then neglecting her duties. But I've been working seriously. Pushing most of your work onto the newbies?
At Michael's words, Ashley fell silent, her face turning pale. Apparently, she tried to become Michael's mistress for her own gain, pushing her duties as a doctor onto others and following Michael around. Just like when she took David away, she probably thought it would be easy to steal Michael from plain old me. I felt a surge of anger.
Sorry, but Michael isn't like David. He doesn't judge people just by their appearance or wealth.
Ashley glared at me, her face turning red with anger. To add insult to injury, Michael continued my point.
No matter how beautiful or wealthy you are, you can't compare to the beauty of Lisa's heart. Not in a million years would there be anything between us. That can't be.
Deeply wounded in her pride, Ashley began to sob softly. While comforting Ashley, David glared at us. They had been arguing just moments ago, yet now they showed a significant bond. I wanted to make a sarcastic remark, but I held back. Then David, twisting his mouth, threw a sneer at us.
Even if you say your heart is pure, looking at Ashley and me like this, you must be pleased, right? How is that pure?
Michael's lips twitched at David's words. That is a sign that he was feeling angry, which made me give a wry smile. Beside me, Michael managed a smile and spoke.
David, it seems you've been borrowing money from some rather dubious sources. Why do you know about that? When the stalking was confirmed, we had it investigated.
Michael said, pulling documents from his bag. There, detailed were David's debts and from which financial institutions he had borrowed.
Debts? What do you mean? Oh, this is, well...
Ashley, unaware of the debts, looked astonished at David.
David, you were laid off half a year ago, weren't you? Is the reason for the debts to hide the fact that you lost your job? Why go so far? No, that's not it.
David hastily denied, but it was too late. Ashley glared at David with a furious red face.
Laid off? You haven't been working. So all our living expenses were on debts. It's your fault. With your extravagant spending, even a high salary wouldn't cover it all.
As they began their pathetic quarrel, my smartphone rang.
Hello, yes, we're in the very back. They've arrived?
Yes, seems like they have. As I spoke, there was a knock at the private room's door. And as the door opened, David's eyes widened in shock.
Dad, Mom.
Yes, the ones who had called me were David's parents. They had heard about the current commotion through my parents and had called to apologize to me. They also mentioned they had something they wanted to address, hence asking for this meeting. Once seated, David's parents gave David a stern look and took out a document.
We've come here so you could sign this. What is this?
As David read the document, his face turned pale. It was a declaration of renunciation of inheritance.
Inheritance renunciation? Then what about the house? The savings? What am I supposed to do? It's all going to Lisa. What? Why?
As David raised his voice, so did David's father. Of course. You think we'd leave anything to you? Lisa even invited us to her wedding and has celebrated our birthdays. You've been disowned, so you have no rights to any inheritance.
David's mother nodded vigorously in agreement. David was frozen, his face going pale.
What am I supposed to do? I have debts. I thought I could pay them off with the inheritance. Drop that spoiled thinking.
The moment David's father delivered the final blow, David slumped, defeated. Beside him, Ashley also turned pale. It seems the lack of money was indeed true as she murmured, "What are we going to do now?"
Right. Lisa, marry me. What?
Just when I thought the discussion might be ending after several minutes of silence, David suddenly blurted out such a thing. Words that might have made me happy over a decade ago when we were dating now only felt disgusting. I flatly rejected him.
Absolutely not. First of all, I'm already married to Michael, and don't you have Ashley?
But David wouldn't give up. With desperate eyes, he pleaded further.
Come on, we're childhood friends, aren't we? Please help me out. If I marry you, I'll get an inheritance and can pay off my debts. I'm disgusted.
Always about money, money, money. There might have been some residual feelings from our childhood, but now they were completely gone. I put on a smile. Then, David, misinterpreting my smile, grinned happily. It was a smile far removed from the innocent one I knew from childhood, filled instead with greed. Ah, the David I loved back then is gone. I felt like I could finally put the past behind me. No more feelings left. I kept my smile and spoke.
Absolutely not. Marrying you would make me sick. What? And I'm very happy now. So, never come near me again.
David, who had never been rejected so clearly before, stared at me in disbelief. His father, prompting him, passed him a pen. David signed the document with that pen and then sluggishly left the private room.
Wait a minute.
Ashley followed him out. Finally, it was over. I signaled to the server. Then, a plethora of dishes began arriving.
Thank you for today. Please eat a lot.
David's father were very happy, savoring the meal. Michael and I also enjoyed our meal watching them. Later, I heard that David and Ashley had divorced. Ashley's dismissal was not revoked, and although she tried to work at another hospital, apparently her bad reputation had spread far and wide, and no one would hire her. Originally extravagant, Ashley had no savings and was now barely getting by, selling her luxury items and working part-time. But her haughty nature meant she couldn't stay in one place for long. David seemed to have vanished after that. He might be working on a fishing boat to pay off his debts, or maybe he's been sent abroad to earn money. Either way, it's his own doing, and it's no longer my concern. Occasionally, I hear that there's still some deposits being made to David's parents, so he's probably still alive. Though we've cut ties, he's still their only son. I hope they at least get informed about whether he's alive. His parents gave me most of their assets as a living gift. I used some of that to pay for their entrance fees to a comfortable facility. They said they wanted to pay for it themselves, but I don't like to just receive without giving back. I insisted on giving back a little. After much thought, I secured rooms for 4, for both my parents and David's parents in a luxury retirement home. For now, they still live next to each other as before, planning to move when necessary. Both sets of parents were delighted to know they'd be neighbors even after moving. Recently, Michael successfully performed surgery on a difficult case. He became an overnight sensation. Requests for TV interviews came daily, but for Michael, patients come before television. Therefore, he mostly declines interviews, saying they interfere with his work. That's why I fell in love with Michael, I realize once again. By the way, we recently adopted a child. Actually, Michael can't have children due to an accident when he was young. I knew this when I married him. However, Michael loves children deeply. I've lost count of how many times I've thought it would be nice if we had children, seeing him dote on his pediatric patients. That's why, after many discussions, we decided to adopt. The child who came to us is a 6-year-old boy. We named him Leo. He was put into an institution shortly after birth. The moment I locked eyes with him, I felt he was undoubtedly the one. Michael felt the same, and soon after a trial period, Leo officially became part of our family. Although he's still a bit reserved, Leo has made our home brighter and more lively. Not only that, but Leo is very bright, quickly absorbing everything Michael teaches him. He's been saying he wants to be a doctor even before we adopted him, so Michael is completely dedicated to his studies.
Mom? What is it?
Savoring the joy of being called for the first time, I responded. Today, Leo and I have promised to make pancakes. Michael's favorite. Little by little, like this, we're becoming a family. I thought this as I laid out the ingredients in the kitchen.
All right, Leo. Shall we give it a go?
Yeah. With his energetic reply, we began cooking. Excited about our life ahead, I started cracking eggs.